to Nostradamus and his quatrains, here to speak the future once again. Hey. Well, hey there. Hi. I'm Nostradamus, but I'm sure you know that. You know, even though I lived in 16th century France, I've got problems that most modern men can appreciate today. Frankly, no one understands me. I know, right? Most people form an opinion about me before they got to know me or even read my first book. Oh, yes, I've written a book. In fact, it's been on the bestseller list since it was first published in, wow, 1555, I believe. Quite a ways ago. You heard me right. Not only am I a best-selling author, but I developed a widely popular series of books that predated Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. Although I'd like to think that my book was an inspiration for most of those. Well, color me selfish, but there it is. You know, some people have called me a seer, and other people have called me, what's the words? Oh, severely mentally damaged. That's hard to say. I understand, but you know, at the time, I had quite a wide following when I first published my 343 quatrains in 1555. I think it was 343. There's so many at the time. And due to popular demand, I published a second edition and a third edition. Between you and me, I was ready to publish a fourth, but I died in 1566. Luckily, someone went through the rest of my papers and published a revised edition in 1568, I believe, with 941 rhyming quatrains grouped together in 9 century, which is still around and exists today. So, what did I do? More importantly, what did I say to make me so famous? Or at least in other people's eyes. Well, before I tell you, let me give you some behind the scenes, if you will, of Nostradamus' life at the time. You know, I'm French, and since all my work was written in French, I have to say that a lot of the details might have been a little changed or lost due to the translations over the years. Second, well, I'm a medical doctor, and I'm not a one-man spelling bee, so frankly, I have made and can make spelling mistakes. But as a doctor, I have some pretty horrendous handwriting, as most doctors do, so there's that, and I can understand some misinterpretation. Understand that my quatrains, the things I'm trying to express, may not be directly science per se, and well, I can understand why people would sometimes read them and consider it to be nonsense. Well, as they say these days, or at least the kids do, you can't hate the haters. I'll let you decide after I read a few of my quatrains to see whether or not you think I'm a prophet or in some ways a puppet. Oh, I have a few right here. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Quatrain 135. I'll try to give it some gravitas for you. The young lion will overcome the older one on the field of combat in a single battle. He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made 1. Then he dies a cruel death. I know, right?
Nostradamus warned me about trouble with Henry's life. I warned Henry. He thought I was crazy.
You probably don't know me, as there are so many kings named Henry. But you probably have heard about my famous daughter-in-law, Mary, Queen of Scots, or my famous son-in-law, King Philip of Spain. Of course, you probably have heard how Nostradamus gained his fame by predicting my death in 1559.
But he died months later in a jostling match.
like a lot of my quatrains, this one is a little ambiguous. I admit most noblemen of the time would use a lion as their coat of arms, so I can see where it's not very clear exactly on what I meant, but you know, I did warn my client, Queen of France, Catherine de' Medici, you may have heard her, about her husband, Henry II. After he dies a grisly death in that joust, that was bad. 1559, I believe. Yeah, he was jousting Comte de Montgomery, who was 6 years younger than the king, I think. And they both had lions embossed on their coat of arms. I'm sorry, I divert. But after I told her about that, and it happened, I turned her into a believer. Between you and me, that was handy. Did you know that her uncle was the Pope? Yes. Because of my quatrains, I could have been toasted up like a stick or a marshmallow at a weenie roast. But since I had the Queen's trust, not only did I get a job at the palace, I got a pension when I retired. Not too bad for looking into the future and sharing it with my friends. You know, it reminds me when I worked at the palace, I read for the Queen and her children and her daughter-in-law, the famous or infamous Mary, Queen of Scots.
Francis was 1 year younger than me, but he was shy and quiet. We were like best friends since the day we met. He was so nice to me. Even his mother got jealous for all the attention he gave me.
I got a gift for you.
What is it? How cute. What's it for?
It's so you can always sit by my side.
That's good. I like to sit next to you so I won't look so tall.
Do you really want to marry me?
Of course. Why? Do you have another girl in mind?
No, it's just girls usually want to marry a king so they can become queen. But you're already a queen. You're so beautiful, intelligent, and sweet. So why do you want to marry me?
Because I love you.
Well...
Henry died a painful death, and my son Francis became King of France.
Francis and I used to ride horses, watch sunsets and sunrises, played games, hunted, and traveled from palace to palace. In just 13 years, I had enough memories to last a lifetime.
But if I die, who will protect you?
You won't die.
Francis was a good son, but he cared more about his wife than his mother. But he died less than a year. I have to pull the young Charles to the throne and help him as much as regent.
But every fairy tale has to end. Mine ended when Francis died.
Sadly, I had to reveal her future in the quatrains that I had about her. Very sad. It could be the reason why Queen Catherine was scotching the marriage between her and King of France, Charles the Ninth. Charles the Ninth. Poor Mary. Lovely girl. Filled with joy. Always happy. I got a quatrain of hers that I had in here. That her life would become... here it is. Quatrain 1055. I first foresaw her disastrous marriage to Lord Darnley Henry Stuart, her cousin.
I sometimes thought God knew about my terrible life ahead, so I was given the chance to live my dream in France.
Let's see here. The unfortunate nuptials will be celebrated in great joy, but the end unhappy. Husband and mother will slight the daughter-in-law, the Apollo dead, and the daughter-in-law more pitiful.
If I am the girl who had everything, then you may call my cousin, Henry, the boy who almost had everything. We had the same grandmother, Margaret Tudor, elder sister to King Henry VIII. I was born a princess, while he was only a lord. We both are descendants of Scotland's ruling high stewards, but my family had been sitting on the throne, while his families always failed to reach the crown. He came to attend my wedding with Frances. I would never imagined that the young boy would one day change my life. Henry was intelligent, polite, and very good-looking. He soon earned the likes from the many powerful nobles. I can't deny how much I liked him, but I know my duty to my country, so I turned down his marriage proposal and decided to negotiate marriage with either Spain's Don Carlos or England's Robert Dudley, the man Queen Elizabeth picked for me as a condition to name me as her heir. Don Carlos was crazy, and Robert Dudley had his heart set on another queen. I was sad and lonely, and Henry got seriously ill. I prayed for God to save him. When he got well, I realized that I didn't want to be without him, so I agreed to marry him. But the joy did not last long, as Henry started to fight for power, drink every day, and had many affairs. I was heartbroken, as I couldn't understand the man I loved would change so quickly. But soon I found myself pregnant.
I hear your voice. Nostradamus, what does that mean? Well, you see, Lord Darnley, tall man, extremely tall for the time, about 6 foot 2 inches, very handsome, like an Apollo.
I was disappointed with Henry before, but things turned from bad to worse. One day, he showed up at dinner time unexpectedly. I was very happy as I had not seen him for quite some time, but he came with the intention to kill Rizzio, my secretary, and forced me to sign crown matrimony. Lord Douglas even pointed the gun at me and fired. The gun misfired, and Henry realized that he had been used. Henry begged for my forgiveness. He said he never meant to kill Rizzio, so we escaped together. However, when the Protestant lords fled to England, they showed Henry's signed order to kill Rizzio. I realized that the man I loved was a liar and a murderer. Then I found out if I got a divorce, my son, Prince James, would be illegitimate. I couldn't do that. So I told the lords that I will stay married to him till death do us part. Some lords took that as an order for them to kill my husband, while others thought it would be a perfect way to destroy us both. He left without telling me, but he got sick before he could reach his father at Glasgow. I went to see him. He agreed to come back with me if I promised to be with him when he is well again. I agreed. Although he was at the brink of dying, and no longer the handsome young man I met the year before, the Henry I fell in love with came back slowly. I was so happy, as I would soon have my husband back.
But he was murdered,
Our
unfortunately.
son would have a father he could look up to.
Why are you doing this to me?
But Henry was murdered when he wasn't even 20.
And Queen Mary, well, she took the fall for the murder. She spent 18 years incarcerated because of it. Sad. She didn't commit it. But that was the times and the politics of the day.
I, Mary, Queen of Scots, committed no crime.
Her mother-in-law, Margaret Douglas, her father, King James V's half-sister, I believe, she was engaged in that, but trying to get the crown, if you will. That's why she was kind of pro-marriage, but then once that was done, she was put away. Well, that's the way it goes for the family. I wrote a quatrain about her.
Queen Mary agreed to marry Henry. Queen Elizabeth was shocked and furious and put me into the Tower of London. Oh, the Tower of London, the place I first lost my freedom and my first love 30 years ago. The place where my uncle chopped the heads off of 2 of his queens, but I'm not afraid this time. He fulfilled our dynastic dream, and I have no regret, even if I lose my life in the darkest corner of this tower. However, Matthew and Henry were like 2 lost kids. I've planned every move for them to get the crown, but I left no instruction on what to do after. And with me in the tower, they didn't know what to do. People said Henry behaved badly, and Matthew was immature like a child. I hope all these people can be charged with treason. It was their duty to serve the king. They let him down, and it was all their fault. I hope Queen Elizabeth would one day release me when she realized it was not my fault. And during the wait, good and bad news came through. Queen Mary got pregnant, and a few months later, my grandson was born. Henry got crazy and killed the Queen's secretary, and then changed sides and tried to escape with the Queen. But no one can prepare me for what happened next. A news that came to me in February of 1567. The Queen released me with the news that both Matthew and Henry were assassinated. The words were like knives and I went crazy. I cried, I screamed. I just wanted to kill everyone because they had all left me down. If not for Charles, I would have killed myself. And then I learned that Matthew was unharmed. So only my Henry died. Then my strength came back. I couldn't die. I had to find Henry's killer and avenge it. Matthew and Charles needed me. After Henry's death, a long list of suspects appeared. If it were up to me, I would have just killed them all. Matthew thought Bothwell did it. He was in charge of Edinburgh security, and Henry was under his watch. A trial was held, and he was found not guilty. But then he married Queen Mary. That slut. How could she lay in the arms of another man after her murdered husband was in his cold grave? Matthew and I begged Queen Elizabeth to execute her for killing my son. We cried so hard that Queen Elizabeth had guards pulled out when we refused to leave. Then the Protestant lords turned against Queen Mary, forcing Bothwell into exile, and they held the Queen in the Lochleven Castle. She was forced to abdicate the crown to my grandson James. When she miscarried by Bothwell, everyone thought she would soon die, but she escaped. She fought with 6,000 men, but she lost. She fled to England seeking help from Queen Elizabeth. Help? There was no help. She was held for 18 years before Queen Elizabeth cut her head off.
Oh, here it is, 1084. The illegitimate girl so high, not low. The late return will make the graved one contended. The reconciled one will not be without debates in employing and losing all his time. You see, although Lady Margaret's parents divorced soon after she was born, she was Queen Margaret Tudor's only daughter. It made her high on the succession list. And I'm sorry, I'm getting wrapped up in my work again. It's been a while since I've read all the quatrains, and it's just nice to share them with someone who's interested. I appreciate the opportunity to look back at the things I've done, which were basically looking forward. And it's nice to know that they've survived and are still being looked at and used and valuable today. So if nothing else, I think I've accomplished that. Thanks again.